Prologue. Night always carries things left unsaid. Behind the dim streetlights, the houses stood silent, each keeping its own stories. Inside one of them, a small dining table still bore traces of dinner. A tie hung neatly, waiting for morning. Upon it lingered a scent, faint, soft, unfamiliar. It clung to the fabric like an uninvited memory. Claire Bennet stared at the tie without moving. Her eyes were empty, but her mind raced, threading thoughts together like unraveling yarn. Somewhere, in the quiet routine she had built with her husband, Ethan Morgan, a small crack had widened. A crack not born from arguments or loud collisions, but from something else, an unseen presence that had returned to uncover a buried past. Ethan Morgan, the man who once swore eternal loyalty when they were young, had begun to change direction. He came home late, always with work as an excuse. He came home with a different scent each night. He came home with stories told in fragments, some spoken, some hidden. Claire chose silence. Her silence became a long, quiet investigation of the heart. In that city, some people measured happiness by the smiles they showed. But others knew fragile happiness doesn't shatter with noise. It fades slowly through neglect, quietly and without warning. Chapter 1. The Scent That Whispers. Since the day she married Ethan, Claire had always been sensitive to small details. She remembered how Ethan once replaced the dish soap just because she said the old one smelled strange. She remembered how he used to help her choose clothes for office events, patting her back gently whenever she hesitated. Their love had grown from little gestures like those, tiny moments that over time became the foundation of their marriage. But in recent months that foundation had started to crack. "What's wrong, Claire?" she whispered to herself the first night she noticed the scent on Ethan's tie. That was all she said, softly, while cleaning the tie her husband had worn to work earlier. The scent was delicate, floral, and unfamiliar. Ethan always preferred neutral colognes, something clean, masculine, and subtle. This one was different. Day after day the scent changed. Sometimes sweet like vanilla, sometimes fresh like citrus, sometimes warm like wood and musk. Each variation became a quiet alarm in her heart. Perhaps there was another woman. Still, she didn't want to accuse. Married life had plenty of space for misplaced suspicions. Claire remembered what her mother once said: "Don't rush to judge, but never close your eyes when your heart starts to see." So she chose patience over confrontation, observation over accusation. She began to ask simple things: what meetings he had that week, whether there were sudden events, which clients he met, who was new in the office. Ethan always answered pleasantly but briefly. "Just work stuff," he'd say with a smile, but the smile no longer calmed her. It made her question everything. Chapter 2. The New Assistant. News of Ethan's new assistant spread through the company like a whisper. Daniel Carter, a close friend who loved office gossip, texted Claire one afternoon. "Your husband just got a new assistant. She's stunning, sharp, confident, total pro." It sounded ordinary. Ethan had been swamped lately. Hiring help made sense. But when Claire finally met the woman, something deep inside her stirred with unease. Her name was Vanessa Ruiz. She walked into their living room with calm grace, her blazer perfectly pressed, dark hair swept to one side, a polite smile resting on her lips. She radiated poise and quiet intelligence. Ethan introduced her lightly as though it were nothing. "This is Vanessa, my new assistant. She'll help me manage the new projects." They exchanged polite greetings. The meeting was short, professional, harmless on the surface. Yet when the door closed behind Vanessa, Claire found herself staring at Ethan longer than usual. Her eyes searched his face for an explanation she couldn't yet form. Ethan smiled, too quickly, too tightly. "Don't worry, Claire," he said. "It's just work." But Claire knew something in his body language betrayed him. The flicker of awkwardness, the way he avoided her gaze. His smile wasn't whole. Chapter 3. A Shadow Reappears. Days passed, heavy with silence. The evenings they once spent planning weekend getaways had turned into quiet dinners and unspoken thoughts. One rainy afternoon, Claire decided to tidy Ethan's study, a task she rarely bothered with. Inside a drawer, she discovered an old envelope stuffed with faded photographs. In them, a young Ethan laughed beside a woman with loose curls and bright eyes. Written on the back of one photo were two simple words, "For Vanessa." Her heart didn't break loudly, it simply ached in disbelief. A foggy memory came rushing back. Years ago, back when she and Ethan were still dating, he had once mentioned a girl named Vanessa. He had said the name softly, almost tenderly, then changed the subject before she could ask more. Now the past she never met was sitting across from him at work. Claire placed the photos back where she'd found them. She didn't want a scene. She wanted clarity. She began to gather pieces slowly, asking Lily Summers, her best friend, what she knew, watching patterns in Ethan's schedule, listening more than she spoke. Lily reminded her gently that everyone has a past and not every past is a threat. But the perfume on the ties said otherwise. It lingered like a breadcrumb trail leading to something much larger. Chapter 4. Voices Behind the Door. One drizzly night, Claire left her mother's house early, carrying Ethan's favorite takeout as a small surprise. When she reached his office building, she noticed his car still parked out front and his office light glowing through the blinds. She hesitated at the door. From inside came muffled laughter, his and a woman's. She recognized Vanessa's voice instantly. "You still remember how to make me laugh," Vanessa said softly. "You were always the organized one," Ethan replied, a nostalgic warmth coloring his tone. The conversation wasn't scandalous, yet every word pierced Claire. It wasn't what they said, it was how they said it, the familiarity woven through each syllable. She stood there long enough to feel her fingers grow cold. Then she turned and walked away, the rain soaking her shoes while the food in her hands cooled untouched. The chill she felt wasn't from the weather. It came from somewhere deeper, somewhere she couldn't name. That night she didn't confront him. She needed courage and evidence and a calm heart, because shouting wouldn't bring the truth, listening would. Chapter 5. Unfolding Memories. The clues multiplied. A half-deleted email thread with Vanessa's name attached. Shared project files. Meeting notes marked with her handwriting. Each discovery pushed Claire closer to certainty. She recalled fragments of things Ethan had told her long ago. Stories of college, of a girl he once cared for but lost touch with. He'd glossed over details, claiming it didn't matter. Now she realized he'd simply sealed that chapter and hoped it would stay buried. Lily urged her to speak with him calmly, to give him a chance. But Claire's trust had thinned into glass. One wrong word could shatter it completely. That evening she sat alone on a park bench near their home, watching couples stroll by, children chasing ducks, laughter filling the air. She wondered if all those smiles hid small fractures too. Was happiness always this fragile, bright on the surface, cracked underneath? The more she thought, the clearer it became. Something precious between her and Ethan had quietly changed shape. Chapter 6. The Unraveling Plan. One morning, while returning a borrowed folder to Ethan's office, Claire accidentally saw a small note slip from Vanessa's bag. It listed meeting times and guest names for an upcoming charity event. On the margin, a line caught her eye. "See you at 5. Out of habit, she glanced at the phone number scribbled next to it, and it looked painfully familiar. Her hands trembled as she dialed. Ethan's voice answered. That was the moment everything aligned. The scent, the photos, the tone in his voice, the stolen glances. Vanessa wasn't just an assistant. She was a ghost from his unfinished past. And Claire, unknowingly, had been living in the echo of a story that had never truly ended. Yet what hurt most wasn't the possibility of betrayal, it was the intent. Why had Vanessa come back now? Why had Ethan let her in so easily? Claire felt the truth forming like a storm on the horizon. This wasn't coincidence, it was design. Chapter 7: Hidden Revenge. Whispers began to circulate. One afternoon at a cafe, Lily Summers happened to overhear a conversation between one of Vanessa's old acquaintances and another woman. The story that unfolded made everything clearer. Years ago, Vanessa Ruiz and Ethan Morgan had been inseparable. They had made plans, promises, and futures together. Then one day, Ethan simply disappeared. No letter, no call, and months later, news spread that he had married someone else, Claire Bennett. That news struck Vanessa like a stone thrown into still water. The ripples reached every corner of her life. Time passed, but the wound never closed. What had once been love hardened into quiet resentment, and resentment, when carefully fed, became a plan. So when a position opened in Ethan's company, she took it. She learned to smile professionally, to speak softly, to hide her motives behind efficiency. Every polite nod, every compliment, every perfume she wore was chosen for one reason: to remind Ethan of what he'd left behind and to make him regret it. When Claire pieced this together, her emotions twisted between pity and exhaustion. Vanessa's plan was cruel, but the root of it lay in Ethan's old selfishness. Claire didn't want to destroy reputations or make a scene. What she wanted was the truth, however painful it might be. Chapter 8: The Anonymous Letter. When the tension became unbearable, Claire did something unexpected. She wrote a letter, unsigned, and placed it on Vanessa's desk before dawn. "I know who you are. I know what you're doing. Stop before everything breaks." It wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. Claire hoped that by seeing her reflection through someone else's eyes, Vanessa might question her own motives. After that day, the air in the office thickened. Vanessa's flawless composure faltered. Her smile cracked at the edges. Ethan noticed the shift. Daniel Carter noticed too. Whispers filled the corridors, but no one spoke aloud. Everyone sensed that something fragile was about to snap. Chapter 9: The Unfinished Confrontation. One late afternoon, with sunlight fading through the glass walls, Ethan asked Vanessa to step into his office. Claire, sitting in the car outside, saw them through the window. She didn't mean to watch, but she couldn't look away. Inside, Ethan's voice trembled, part guilt, part sorrow. "Why are you here, Vanessa? Why come back now?" Vanessa met his gaze, calm yet wounded. "Because you left first," she said. "You walked away without a word. I just wanted you to understand what that felt like." Their conversation turned into a soft storm of unfinished sentences. Youthful mistakes, fears, apologies that came too late. Ethan's eyes grew wet. He looked like a man realizing the cost of his silence. Outside the room, Claire stood frozen. She didn't rush in, didn't shout. She simply listened, letting the truth carve itself quietly into her heart. When Vanessa finally left the building, Ethan remained seated, holding his head in his hands, trapped in the web he had spun years ago. Chapter 10: The Decision Rooted in Silence. Days turned cold and still. The house that once held warmth now echoed with politeness. Breakfast became ritual, not comfort. Ethan tried to speak, the words caught in his throat. Claire watched him and saw not malice but a man cornered by his own past. She didn't want scandal, she didn't want pity, she wanted peace and dignity. Night after night she asked herself the same questions. Can I live with a man who invites ghosts into our home? Can I keep breathing air that no longer smells like mine? The answers condensed into one word: no. One foggy morning she packed a small suitcase. On the table she left a short letter. Steady handwriting, no tears on the paper. Ethan, I'm leaving to keep my dignity. I'm not leaving because of rumors, but because I can't live under a shadow you allowed inside our home. Take care of yourself. Claire. She didn't wait for confrontation. She walked out quietly, leaving behind the house that had once been built on love. Chapter 11. The Stillness After. Ethan came home that evening to find the suitcase gone and the note open on the table. His voice broke as he read her name at the end. Claire, a name that once meant comfort, now separation. He called her again and again. The line rang endlessly. Texts went unread. Regret flooded his chest so quickly he could hardly breathe. He searched for her parents' house, the school where she used to teach, the cafe they loved. Nowhere. She had vanished like morning fog. The once cheerful home stood silent, echoing only his footsteps. At work, whispers spread. Daniel looked at him with quiet sympathy. Ethan's charm had dulled into fatigue. For the first time he understood what he had truly lost. Not a colleague, not a routine, but the gentle certainty of being loved. Chapter 12. The Shadow of Regret. Weeks turned into months. Ethan lived in circles, work, silence, work again. Each night he sat at the dining table, staring at the same tie, still catching faint traces of old perfume. The scent no longer belonged to anyone. It was just memory. Vanessa resigned not long after Claire left. Daniel saw her one evening, eyes red, typing something on her phone, a long message that she deleted before sending. The revenge that had once burned bright had turned to ash. She had won nothing. No satisfaction comes from breaking someone who already feels broken. Ethan carried the quiet weight of his past choices. He remembered how safety had seemed easier than honesty, how he'd chosen comfort over courage. Now the cost of those decisions lived with him every morning he woke alone. Chapter 13. The Permanent Farewell. Months later, a letter arrived in his mailbox. Neat handwriting, familiar curves. Claire's. I tried to stay, for the house, for the memories, for the family we once dreamed of. But I can't keep living under a shadow that isn't mine. Thank you for the good years. Take care of your life. Ethan read it again and again, searching for loopholes, but there were none. The finality was absolute. He brought flowers to her door, knocked, waited, no answer. She had moved on, quietly, gracefully, completely. For the first time in his life, Ethan understood that apologies can't rebuild what neglect has dissolved. Epilogue. The Scent That Remains. Years slipped by. Ethan Morgan aged into a man people described as kind, calm, and strangely sad. At the office he was respected. At home he lived among echoes. He learned in the hardest way that love demands respect, honesty, and the courage to guard its borders. One dusky evening he opened an old drawer and found a photograph. Himself and Claire on a beach, wind in their hair, laughter frozen in sunlight. The picture smiled back at him with a purity that time could never return. Love had been there once, real, bright, and he had let it crumble. Somewhere in another city, Claire woke early to the smell of fresh coffee. Her new apartment overlooked a garden. She worked part-time, tended her plants, and built routines that belonged only to her. She didn't hate Ethan. She simply released him so she could breathe again. Each morning she looked at the sky and whispered a quiet truth she had earned. Love must be honest to survive, and sometimes saving yourself means walking away from something beautiful. The perfume's trace no longer clung to anyone's tie. It lived only as a memory, a reminder that some presences come to test us, some mistakes come to teach us, and some goodbyes exist so we can finally find ourselves.